If you're on a road to awakening, probably one thing that you notice, and I'm no different, and lots of other people are on this road to consciousness, is the frustration of how this works. Meaning that we have something come up, some kind of existential crisis in our life, or a piece of shadow work to do. And then we then we do all the stuff that everybody tells us to do, and we meet it. We feel like we've got it figured out, and we think that we've healed that wound, and we're on our way, and we're now spiritually enlightened, or we at least have that piece of work out of the way. And then, like stuffing a badger in a bag, um, the same issue seems to come back up again. And oftentimes this comes with a feeling of dread, mostly because we feel like we're moving forward, and this feels like a big step back. And the truth is it's not. The concept is that it's consciousness is a spiral, meaning that we meet that wound here. We think we got it figured out. We stuff the badger in the bag, and we continue in our life, and then all of a sudden we meet that wound again here. It feels like in those moments, that secondary hit when the badger escapes the bag again, it feels like we haven't moved at all, that we haven't healed any wound, that we haven't made any spiritual progress. And I come from lots of experience of doing this. And so it's always good to be reassured in those times. And the more something that helped me get through those times quicker was just knowing that I'm actually moving up in consciousness, that I'm seeing the wound at the second time, and the third time, and the fourth time, and the fifth time. I'm seeing it all from a higher level of consciousness. And from a very realistic view, when I healed, or I thought I healed the wound, I opened up a bit of what I was unconscious to. And then the next time that it comes around, I've opened up a little bit more consciousness. And then a little bit more, and a little bit more, and a little bit more, and a little bit more. And I have found in my journey that this quickens, and you get through these much, much quicker because you have experience. It's just like anything else in life. Once you get used to something, it happens quicker. But I wanted to kind of take this down another road to, first of all, who do you look to? Who are other people that are awakening? And what is something else that you're recognizing when these things come up and this healing and transformation is going on? When you meet that wound at this point in consciousness, let's say that's the first time that you meet this, you put the badger in the bag. What we often find, or what we should find, is irony. And what I mean by that is the reason that we can't let go of this wound is because we have a belief system where we're fixated on a belief system that that is enabling that wound to stay put and not be let go. So when the healing happens and the release happens, what's actually happening is we recognize the belief system, and when we recognize that belief system was what was actually holding us back, that is the definition of irony, is that we were holding the key to our own unfoldment the whole time. That's what irony is. Irony, the carpenter that lives in a brick house, the plumber lives in a house without plumbing. So what happens when we deepen in consciousness is the next time that we meet that level, what happens at that level is when the new consciousness arises, what we do is we see In the first level, we should see the irony of the belief system. And the second time we come to that, if there's a second time, then we should see that between there was even more work to do, and there was another belief system that needed to be absolved or dissolved, and there's irony that's in that. And if you pay attention on this spiral and on your journey as you're going through these kind of things, what this does is it gives you a really healthy connection with irony, and that you understand that on the second time you will understand that it wasn't just this big uh, belief system that you had, but yet there were other little belief systems that were attached to that belief systems. So another way to say that is there was nuance within the nuance, or within the big thing. And then the third time you hit it, you should find more irony, and more irony, and more irony, and more irony, and more irony. And so, so we can use irony as an indicator. So how do we know? I mean, one of the big things was I followed everybody in the beginning, book, spiritual guides, mentors, went to lots of workshops and that sort of thing. Who are the people that actually know what's going on and they're actually moving into consciousness? Because I have, in retrospect, looked at some of the spiritual leaders that I've followed and found them to be very hypocritical. They were very good at laying out very powerful conceptual understanding of spirituality, but they didn't seem to walk the walk. There was something off with them. And I've actually seen some of those spiritual gurus, some very, very, very popular, that uh, that had before they passed, they had a spiritual awakening that brought them out of that conceptual understanding of spirituality and into the real um, down on the dirt, you know, consciousness. And so, what to look for? If you want to, so the way that I look at it now is that a spiritual awakening will take us from one paradigm to another paradigm. So to me, you could call it the ego paradigm and the soul paradigm. And for me, like people like the poetry of Rumi is a calling, a yearning coming from my heart to make that move from this paradigm to this paradigm. So what ends up happening though is that my whole spiritual journey is trying to get from this, the way of seeing the world, this filter, to this filter, which is the soul's version. So not only will I have the yearning coming from Rumi's poems, but I want all the other benefits. I want to live Rumi. I don't just want to be momentarily taken by a line from a poem. I actually want to live it. I want that to be my filter. But the problem is that I was always looking through this paradigm trying to get to this paradigm. So I was using all the tools of this paradigm to get to this paradigm. So this would be a suggestion to look for in who to pay attention to when you look at spiritual teachers, and you're looking for outside influences that help model where you're trying to go. And probably one of the biggest things is perspective. Somebody that can see more and more nuance, and they understand irony, and they have a good sense of irony. People who recognize irony are warm and juicy, and they live by irony. They delight in finding the irony that they step into themselves. You have to be humble in order to relish the gifts of irony. Um, and those people will laugh from their belly, whereas people who laugh from their head are coming from wit. They're coming from the ego. George Carlin's a really good example for me. I think he's a brilliant comedian. And especially in his last years, some of his stand-up material was really, really cynical, not skeptical, cynical. And it was very pointed, it was very judgmental, and it made me laugh from my mind and not from my belly. Um, Not saying that George Carlin wasn't awake. I think George Carlin was awake to um, seeing a lot of perspective. The thing was is that I think that he was very cynical, and he kind of let his mindset go that way. And one way that that could happen, and we see this in our daily life, is you get addicted to hypocrisy. And basically, hypocrisy and irony are very close. There can be irony within hypocrisy. Um, and hypocrisy is more of a moral um, bent to it. So, meaning that the irony that you would find, and George Carlin was very good at pulling out the hypocrisy within religion as an atheist. Um, but he was also, when you get fixated on hypocrisy, you become cynical. And then things come from your mind rather than from your heart and from your belly. And so, looking for people who have an authenticity, and that's another thing is these people are very authentic, and they're willing to laugh at themselves. They're willing to, if you want to test them, they like to be tested. People who are cynical don't want to be tested because cynical people want just to right hypocrisy. Um, they don't want to be able to serve. They don't want to be able to hold to, they want to call right and wrong. And it's kind of uh, what's happening within religion. Atheism is doing a really good job of bringing up the hypocrisy within a punitive God. The only problem is most atheistic um, popular shares with the world is beating the hypocritical drum, I would say, constantly just saying this is look at the hypocrisy of this church, look at the hypocrisy of this religion, and I would say you could still be atheistic, you can still be an atheist. See, that's where you can hold two different visions. You don't need to believe in God to believe in irony. And the thing about atheism is, to me, it's a real focus outside. It's designed to be the antithesis to religion. And it's limiting and it doesn't help. Once people get to atheism, it's not a far step to nihilism and meaninglessness and relativity, and then what do you do from there? You found all the hypocrisy, then you become an expert at hypocrisy, and you dry up and you wither up, and you're not happy, you're not juicy, you're brittle. um, Whereas when you can see, that's the thing is about being atheistic, you can see it. It isn't a matter of, you don't have to turn everything into irony, but you can. Basically, and what that means is, if you see the irony, if you see the hypocrisy within, let's say, religion, then you don't need to focus. You can focus on the irony endemic with that instead of the hypocrisy within that. And that takes the edge off, okay, to judgment. But then it should then go, okay, wait, let me see where I'm stepping in my own irony. Let me see where irony is showing up in my own life. And a lot of brilliant comedy actually comes out of irony. We love irony. We love to watch theater where the character doesn't see themselves as being ironic. Yet we as an audience, we know the irony and that's what makes us belly laugh, is that we watch this character going through their gyrations, to not own their irony of their situation, and that's what moves us. So hopefully that was helpful.